There are also many different types of therapy. Two types I'll talk about now are CBT and psychodynamic therapy. CBT stands for cognitive behavioural therapy. Cognition is just a fancy word for thinking, so cognitive therapy involves looking at thought patterns, obviously self-defeating or problematic thought patterns such as negative thinking or self-judgment, self-criticism. Behaviour looks at what you do, changing your actual behaviour, and these two types of therapy work quite well together. So first of all, cognitive therapy, we look at your thought patterns, the kind of self-talk you engage in, such as the shoulds, I should do this, I should do that, or this will never work, or I'm stuck, nothing will ever change, there's nothing I can do about it. These are obviously self-defeating thought patterns. They generally don't reflect reality extremely well. While there are, of course, restrictions on what we can do and the resources available to us at any given time, usually it's not as bad as the negative thinking would have us believe. So with cognitive therapy, we use various techniques to help you change those negative thought patterns and replace them with more positive and more realistic thought patterns. Behavioural therapy involves looking at what you do and changing those negative behaviours that are unhelpful. For example, drinking too much, or being a daily smoker of weed, these are examples where behaviour can come in, behavioural techniques. So we look at changing behaviour in a systematic way, because you will already have had experience of getting up some days and saying, right, today's going to be different, I'm not going to do this or I'm going to do that. You're full of determination and you may succeed for a while and then you're back to square one. So what's the difference? With behavioural therapy, we systematically change the behaviour piece by piece. So instead of trying to take it all in one go, jumping into the deep end of the pool, so to speak, we incrementally break down the behaviours that need to be changed or the new behaviours that need to begin, and we apply them systematically over a period of time. For example, if drinking is a problem, we might gradually decrease the amount of alcohol that you consume. If social anxiety is the problem, we might come up with some relatively low stress social interactions that you could engage in, rather than sending you straight into a party or a nightclub and expecting you to try and handle that all in one go. So it's a softly approach to changing behaviours, and there's various techniques that we can use around that. As it happens, cognitive therapy and behavioural therapy work very well together. They complement one another, and that's why CBT is popular, and it's effective for many issues such as anxieties, phobias and depression to some extent. Depression is a good example of a problem which sometimes needs deeper work than just changing behaviours and thoughts in the present. Oftentimes I would say, depression is rooted in past problems which are unresolved, and that's where psychodynamic therapy comes in. Psychodynamic therapy looks at childhood, it looks at the past, it looks at traumas or problems in the past that haven't been resolved and which are interfering with your daily life today, usually in an unconscious way, in a way that you wouldn't be aware of. Sigmund Freud developed this type of therapy, and it's still quite useful. Examples would be obviously abuse or neglect as a child. That can often affect how you feel about yourself today. But also lesser things such as parents fighting, alcoholism in the home. This can cause anxiety in adulthood, and it can also contribute to depression. So for some problems I use CBT and psychodynamic approach side by side. So there's a parallel approach. We're using two techniques, and for many problems that's the most effective approach. You may have seen a piece on mindfulness on my website, mindhealing.ie. Mindfulness is a technique for slowing the mind down and trying to get a bit of peace in your head, which sometimes is sorely lacking. Mindfulness is a fairly straightforward way of paying attention to the present moment in a non-judgmental way. So basically just letting go of the criticisms, the judgments, and especially the judgments. We oftentimes have a tendency to judge things as good or bad in one way or another. We like it, we don't like it, it's wrong, it's right, it shouldn't be allowed, or everyone should be doing it. We tend to have these opposites in our minds, good, bad kind of dichotomies. So what we do with that is we try and look at most of life as being kind of neutral, and if we can let go of the judgments, if we can stop judging things as being good or bad, we tend to feel better, because of course if we see things as being good, that makes us feel happy enough. But if a lot of what we see in our lives we're unhappy about, if we judge it in a negative way, negative feelings tend to follow. So you feel sad or angry or anxious and generally unhappy and discontent with your life. So judgments in your own mind can actually have a big impact on how you feel about yourself, and mindfulness is a useful way of changing that thought pattern. Other therapies I use also to supplement talk therapy. One is sand therapy, and you'll see that a little bit about that on the website as well. Sand therapy involves working at the unconscious level, so it would fall into the more psychodynamic area, and it involves using symbolic figurines, toy figures, and placing collections of those figures in an actual sandbox. You may have seen children doing this, playing with this. It's also just a normal form of play, but it can be used in a therapeutic way as well in therapy. It's based on the work of Carl Jung in particular, but it works quite well, and it oftentimes helps root out the more unconscious problems that may be troubling you, that you're not aware of and can't actually talk about because it's not in your conscious mind. Play therapy is a kind of therapy we use with children roughly between ages 4 and 10. Play therapy allows children, in a similar way to sound therapy, to express their problems and work through their issues in an indirect way through playing with carefully selected toys which also have symbolic value. Children are too young at that age to talk about their issues in any great depth or think about them, and their tendency is to avoid actually doing that for that reason. So play allows children to work out their difficulties in an indirect way that doesn't cause them distress or anxiety, and it's quite effective. And I also am trained in play therapy, and I'm available to see children also